One of the fastest ways to destroy your agency is by agreeing to a bad revenue share deal. We all think revenue share is super attractive because instead of charging $2,000 a month, you earn $2,000 plus a percentage of the revenue that you make for the client, right? But most of these deals are structured horribly. You do all the work, the client makes all the money, and then you just end up arguing about attribution or something else instead of getting paid. So in this video, we're gonna break down how revenue share deals should be structured so you don't lose money, leverage, and transparency. If you guys want more clients, more sales, and marketing that actually works, you should subscribe because that's what all my videos are built to help you do. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna talk about is why we do revenue share in the first place. So as agencies, we do revenue share because it makes us more money, right? So instead of the client just paying us $3,000 a month, they pay us $3,000 plus a percentage of the revenue that we generate them. Now, of course, this is extremely powerful for somebody who's a very talented marketer because the better of a marketer you are, the more money you make, right? But the important caveat here is that revenue share works the best when you control all of the aspects of whatever marketing that you're doing. So you control where the traffic is coming from, where the traffic is going to, the tracking infrastructure, the lead routing into the CRM, the automations and follow-ups, et cetera, et cetera. Because if you're responsible for generating all this revenue, but you don't control the whole system that produces and tracks the revenue, you're exposing yourself to a ton of risk, primarily that your client might mismanage or misattribute the leads. So let's say, for example, you're working with a local landscaping company and you run amazing Google ads and you get them 30 new calls per month. But their team is not answering the phones, number one, and they're not following up with the people who they do answer the phone from. So neither you're gonna make any money, right? So this revenue share deal would not make any sense. It would be a waste of your time. All right, so now we can talk about the biggest problems inside of revenue share deals and what typically happens. So the biggest reasons why revenue share deals fail is because there's no data transparency and there's some kind of dispute about where the leads are coming from. Because when money that you're earning and money that the client is paying you out of pocket is tied to a percentage of revenue, you need to both agree where this money is actually coming from. If you don't have very, very clear attribution, you're gonna start arguing 24/7 with all your clients. So here are some common situations you might have run into. So let's say first you might have an attribution conflict. So a lead comes into the pipeline and eventually becomes a sale. Your customer might claim that that sale was referred internally, and you are going to say, well, it came from a paid lead campaign. And if you don't have clear tracking, there's no possible way that you can resolve this truthfully. Secondly, you could have some delayed reporting issues. So in a lot of niches, company reports are going to close deals weeks or months after the lead comes into the customer's ecosystem. And if you can't see real-time updates inside of the CRM or access those deal reports, right? You have to rely on whatever that company is sharing with your team. And this makes it basically impossible to confirm when deals close and what deals close, and if they came from your marketing efforts, right? And lastly, any kind of untracked channel, right? So let's say leads come in through calls, direct messages on social media, or some kind of manual outreach process, but the leads aren't logged properly. And if those do later become revenue, they don't appear in the data that you see as the marketer. So the solution for these problems is very simple. Every single marketing generated lead needs to enter your customer's CRM with a very clear source tag or some kind of campaign identifier. Like you're tagging this with a UTM from LinkedIn. You're tagging this is from a Google Ads campaign. You're tagging this from Google Organic and they came to a blog first that you wrote. So, and also, even if a deal closes offline, so a phone call or an in-person meeting, the original lead source needs to remain recorded, right? If you generated the lead, the deal needs to stay tied to you in the CRM. Next, we're going to talk about the most important golden rule for revenue share deals, and that is that you should only be entering these kinds of deals with proven offers. So the major mistake here is that if you're entering into a revenue share deal with a business that does not have a proven offer, you are taking on the risk of validating the entire business model and then marketing the business, right? So you have no idea if this offer can actually generate sales. You might know the industry that it's in, you might know some of the people who founded the company, whatever it might be, but you have no idea if this is a proven offer or not. And now this could be a business model, right? You could work with startups. There's plenty of companies out there, plenty of marketing agencies that work with startups. But most of you that are probably watching this video don't have the team size to have half of your team focus on working with startups, and the other half focus on working with these, very complex revenue share agreements. So before you enter any kind of revenue share agreement, your client should be able to demonstrate to you with data that their offer works, right? So in most B2B and consumer marketing environments, this means showing you several months of actual sales data, right? So that might include existing sales volume, historical close rates, let's say if it's some kind of coaching offer, some kind of massive software, right? Demonstrated lead to sale conversion rates, and then past marketing performance. So how have their Google ads performed? How have their LinkedIn ads performed? YouTube CPMs and RPMs, content engagement, whatever it might be. So industry data and in the B2B and consumer marketing world will typically show you that offers require multiple months of sales activity before they become, let's say, predictable to scale. And in that case would be, worthy of you taking on a revenue share deal. So let's say, for example, when you're evaluating any kind of advertising, you usually need 90 days of consistent sales data before you increase spend, right? So that's a good way to relate that to what I just said. So you might have a Google Ads campaign that might generate you 10 to 20 leads in the first week with 2 sales, right? So that would suggest that this offer has a 20% close rate. But over the next 2 months, that rate settles down closer to 8 to 10% as more and more leads come in. So if you don't have a long enough window of performance data, it's really easy for you to try to scale some kind of offer based on numbers that don't hold up over time. If a client comes to you and you think you want to pitch them a revenue share deal, but they can't demonstrate that their offer already converts, you should not be proposing a revenue share deal, period. Now we're going to talk about the common revenue share structures. So there is no correct way to structure a revenue share agreement, but there are a few common structures that tend to work well for the majority of agencies and mid-sized businesses, right? So first we have a simple retainer plus revenue share. So you have a baseline monthly retainer that's paid to you, the agency, and then an additional percentage of revenue that's generated from your marketing campaigns. The retainer is, of course, going to cover your operational marketing costs, let's say paying your team, running your software, and then the revenue share provides the upside to you that's tied to your performance. This is going to reduce the risk for you because you're getting that flat fee, and you're also, of course, having your incentives aligned. Now, for example, for the rest of these examples, we're going to picture that you are the business, not the agency. So let's say you own a B2B software company, and you have a working product, but you have a small sales team, and you really need consistent bookings to start growing. Now, this model would work really well for you because the agency is going to have to run your entire marketing ecosystem because you don't have a massive team to work on content, somebody to work on ads, somebody to actually work on product, et cetera, et cetera. So they're gonna have to run everything, but they also definitely need to be rewarded when they get you those demos that convert, right? Now, another way that you can run revenue share is performance tiers. So revenue share percentages that increase as revenue grows, and a lower percentage is applied up to a defined threshold, right? And then a higher percentage is applied after you get to that threshold. This is going to incentivize the agency, you, if you're the agency in the scenario, to scale beyond a certain point, right? So let's say you own a high ticket coaching business and you are at, close to 6 figures a month. A tiered structure here is going to work really well because the agency that works with you is going to earn a smaller percentage on the first $100,000 that they generate because you're already close to that. But they'll earn a higher revenue share percentage based on revenue above that level because it's going to reward them for specifically pushing you to new heights, right? And lastly, we can use a milestone-based revenue share agreement. So this is pretty similar to the last one. So revenue share that's increasing after some kind of milestone is achieved, right? And these could be milestones that are tied to growth targets, so like maybe a specific CPA for ads, a specific website conversion rate, a specific number of qualified leads per month, and then the higher percentage is activated once a milestone is achieved, right? This encourages, again, same as the last, long-term scaling and very sustained performance, right? So let's say in this case that you own a local home remodeling company and you've never run any kind of digital marketing before. So instead of tying compensation directly to revenue from day one, you stipulate in the agreement that the agency's share after operational milestones are achieved will increase, right? So let's say once they're generating you 30 qualified leads per month. And the reason this is better for you, the home remodeling company owner, is because you've never done any kind of marketing. So it would be very unreasonable for you to expect the agency to get you upside in this deal like instantaneously, because they have no data to, back any of their work, right? You've never made a website. Maybe you threw something up on Webflow or WordPress. You've never run ads before. You have no presence in your local market, right? So once they get you that predictable lead flow, then you can worry about scaling, and they also share in the upside of your scaling, right? The core principle here is that you just need to balance risk and reward for both of you, right? The company is paying you, the agency, for growth, and you just want to make sure that you're receiving upside for your successful marketing. All right, now we can talk about tracking and infrastructure. So as we've been talking about, revenue share deals depend very heavily on accurate tracking. If you don't have very clear infrastructure, it's very hard for you to verify the results that you're getting for the client. The specific system that you use is going to vary depending on the industry, and we're going to talk about them in a moment, but the principle is the same. You need to be able to see how a lead enters the system, how it is handled, and where it ends up in the client's CRM. So we're going to talk about the 4 major areas of business, right? So first, in the coaching and info product world, tracking is usually going to occur in some kind of funnel, webinar registration, application forms. All of the leads should be tagged when they enter the CRM, so the source of that lead is very clear once they close. For local service businesses, the infrastructure usually revolves around some kind of call tracking, maybe call tracking metrics, and form submissions. So phone calls are usually generated through advertising campaigns, on Google, Facebook, whatever, and they should be tracked and logged so they can be tied back to your campaigns, right? So all your Google Analytics events, when you create them, should be labeled form submission, Google Ads, or even form submission, your agency name, Facebook, right? Now in the software environment, the marketing generates demo bookings and email subscriptions. So those demos are going to enter the pipeline, move through different sales stages, through different sales people, and eventually become customers. And at each stage, that lead source originally should not change. So a lot of marketing attributable leads in this niche are lost because they're not tagged when they enter the ecosystem, and then when they move, from salesperson to salesperson, they're just not, continually tracked. Also, a lot of leads are lost because they might have come from some kind of lead magnet or email promotion that you ran as the agency. And if they're not, tracked when they come in from those sources, that lead is never going to be attributed to your agency. Now, in the e-commerce environment, tracking is usually going to happen through some kind of advertising pixel, your Facebook pixel or your Google Ads pixel or your Google Analytics integrations, and some kind of checkout attribution. These systems will usually record when the user clicks on an ad, when they visit the site, and then when they eventually complete a purchase or add something to their cart. And then you'll be able to track the sales and attribute them to whatever campaign brought them there. So the tools are different across industries, but the core principle is the same. You just need to be able to see the path from lead to pipeline to revenue. And lastly here, we're going to talk about when you should not propose or accept a revenue share deal. So there's plenty of situations where revenue share does not make any sense. It's almost guaranteed to make some kind of problem for you, right? So your first red flag is no CRM transparency. So if the client refuses to let you see the CRM, or just in general it's messy, you can't figure out how leads are moving through their pipeline, you can't verify any revenue that's associated with your agency's marketing, right? Now, of course, you can downsell the creation or implementation of a CRM for the client, but you just want to make sure in that case that they're an otherwise competent business so you're not wasting your team's time, right? The second red flag is that, of course, they don't have a proven offer. If they've never demonstrated consistent sales, you're probably taking on more risk than the upside would otherwise justify. And your third red flag is undefined attribution rules. If you and the client can't agree on how revenue is attributed to marketing activity, you're just gonna, butt heads the entire relationship. Now, an example of that would be, let's say if you, the agency, understand, how the customer journey works, and you're creating LinkedIn content for a coach, and you write a lot of posts, and you have these posts tracked to where people come to them, and if they go from that post to the website, you can see that journey. but your client doesn't agree that, let's say, if the person visited a post, 2 days before they completed a form submission to work with your coach, they don't necessarily agree that that is an attributable lead to you, because maybe the person, came back and visited the website, which you didn't build. But again, this goes back to, controlling the entire ecosystem. But again, if you and the client don't agree exactly what a lead is, there is no reason for you to sign a deal with this client, because you're just going to argue about what leads you've earned and what leads their particular ecosystem has earned, right? So before you enter any of these deals, long story short, ask yourself, can I clearly see how leads are entering the client's CRM? Does this business have a proven offer? And have we defined and agreed on how attribution works? If the answer to any of those questions is no, you probably need more structure before you proceed with a revenue share deal. Now guys, structuring a good revenue share deal is a lot easier when you focus on the broader way the agreement works instead of focusing really heavily on what percentage should you charge. Because most agreements are going to change pretty dramatically from business to business, even in the same niche. But I can give you some guidelines. So in the e-commerce world, you can probably get away with 5 to 10% of revenue that you drive. Sometimes that's based on profit and not top line revenue, because you're gonna get a lower percent here. The margins are thinner, the cost of goods sold is really important. For local business, similarly here, there's very tight margins. So maybe 10 to 20% per booked job, or you could do a flat fee per qualified lead. In the coaching world, you might be able to get away with 20 to 30% of total program sales. But again, this could be a lot different depending on the model of the coaching program. If it's low ticket, if it's high ticket, all those different factors. And for software, similarly here, could be 10 to 30% of monthly recurring revenue per of new subscribers. And it could be much lower if you're working with larger companies that are maybe offering IT or business intelligence systems. The important part here is that the agreement reflects the specific context of the business, the system in which you're producing results, and the level of risk that is being taken by each side. If you have an offer that you think would benefit from revenue share, you can leave a comment below and I will help you workshop it.